Hey, look who's here for the part 2. You. Welcome back. Okay, and just to give you a heads up, this video is about 50 minutes long. Oh, you might be wondering, why is this video this long? Oh, well, I have divided it into 3 parts. Part 1, part 2, part 3. And these 3 parts are very, very crucial for you to follow when making an inbuilt corset dress. Yes, because this is an inbuilt corset dress that we're making. And all these steps are embedded in this video. So you can see it's well detailed. And I've explained in details every steps you have to follow to achieve this. So don't miss out. If you skip, you miss. Don't skip this video. Make sure you watch to the end to gain every value that I've shared. Now, for those of you that are new, welcome. Hit the subscribe button. And if you have been here, I say well done. Remember to like and share and drop your comment in the comment section. All right, let's dive into the sewing room. See you. And to kick off, you'll be needing your fabric. Here I have my doll face, lycra, and lace. I'll be using the doll face for the upper part and the lycra for the lower part. You need your interfacing, you have the hairstay, you need your bra cup, thread, boning, zipper, and other things that is necessary for you to make this dress. So to kick off, we'll start off with the skirt part. Yeah. And here I have my skirt pattern. This skirt pattern is a pattern that I drafted for my own measurement. Okay, it's a basic skirt pattern, and because of the time frame I was working with, I had to make use of it to make the work faster. And also skirts are easier to adapt, it's a straightforward thing. So what I did is I marked out her own measurement, okay, using the shape of the skirt that I have here. Okay, so I marked out her waist, hip, and the lower part. Okay, then went ahead to check her waist to hip points. Then traced out the paper first so that I can follow it when I remove it. So mark the length that is required for the skirt. Now this skirt is going to be a long skirt. This particular fabric, this is the lycra fabric I'll be using, and I'm using these measurements, okay, the length measurement you're seeing now, because we don't want to do a full interlining. Okay, don't want to do a full interlining and lining. So after tracing out what I've marked, I went ahead to add my seam allowances. I have about 1.5 inches seam allowance here and cut out. So for the back, I placed the fabric back and used my back pattern. So for the back, I did the same thing, almost the same thing with what I did with the front. So to make the work easier, I just traced out the pattern on the fabric. Okay, so I just follow that silhouette. Okay, so for my skirt patterns, especially the back, I like to work with curves for the center back and for the side. So if you watch the skirt, you see that there. Next, I decide to use the front to cross-check the length so that I can be sure that, okay, they are equal, and they are equal. Next is to impute her own measurement, okay, from the markings that I've done, then connect the lines. So after that, you go ahead and put in your seam allowances. This is very, very important, okay? Seam allowance is important, especially when you're working from your pattern. Okay, so after that, you connect your dots and you cut. So next is to cut out the lace fabric. Now for the lace fabric, this will make up for the length, okay, the full length that you want. Just place the shorter skirt part that you have cut out, trace it down to have your full length, and cut the lace out. You can see how I just followed it down to get my full length and cut it out. It's quite simple. So you cut out following the shape of the shorter lining that you have created. So I'm going to set this aside and work on the upper part. So for the upper part, I've already gone ahead here to cut out my fabric. Okay, I've cut out the lace and the doll face. Now for the doll face, you have to cut it double. Okay, yes, 2 for the interlining and for the main lining. Then you cut out every other thing the same way. Okay, including the hand, that's the strap or the yoke, the bustier, every other part. Next, we are going to use our interfacing. Now, the interfacing we're using here is called hairstay. But before we continue, let me take a break. So I went ahead to eat. So chin. Okay, we're using the interfacing called hairstay. Like I said, this hairstay is like a cotton. It doesn't wear off. Don't use paper stay or any other hairstay that will wear off. This interfacing called hairstay is the best. Just look for it in the market. You can get it from any sewing material shop. Okay. So how do I do this? I place my fabric the wrong side facing me, then I put my hairstay over it, then iron. So it's quite easy. You do this for every door face that you have. And one of the main reason I'm using this estay is because of the structuring. You know, we'll be adding a lot of boning and all that. So it will stabilize the fabric and still keep the fabric in place at the end of the day. Now let's get into the fabric preparation because you have to prepare your fabric before you continue. So here I went ahead to laminate, yes, laminate the lace into the interfacing I'll be using for the lace part. So to avoid pinning and sewing down and all that, use your hemming gum or glue to laminate, okay, on the part where it will not show. Use the edges, yeah, the edges. Okay, apply the hemming gum or your glue on the edges, then place your lace on top. If you're using hemming gum, that means you need to iron on top of it. So that's the trick I applied to make my lace and my face one. So here I've cut out a strip. This strip is on fold, so it's double, and I'm going to use this strip to reinforce the back, the center back. You know why? We'll be using the eyelets and the rope. We want to snatch this dress, and we don't want a situation whereby we are snatching and the dress is getting torn. So this piece will be used for reinforcement for the back. Okay, so I just followed the shape of how I applied my curve for the back because I like to apply this curve. Some cases, some methods, they use the straight method for the back, but here I apply the curve. So if you're using the straight method, that means you don't need to curve out your strip like this. So I have to cut it out this way to have that shape. So when I was done, you can see I flipped it over to show you that it is on fold. When I was done, I pinned it and kept, then applied the same thing for the other part. Now I'll set this aside and work on the lining for the front. Now this is the lining for the front, the main lining, not the interlining, because the interlining has already been attached to the lace, right? So we're going to draw our boning channel line. So you look for the center front line, and on the lower part, which is the hemline, you're going to mark 3 inches to your left and 3 inches to your right. That's a total of 6 inches, or you can make it 7, depends on the size you're working with. Then the upper part, which is the part that contains the bustier area, you just mark your bust span line. Okay, your bust span is what you mark here, half of it to your left, half of it to your right. Here I've marked 8 inches. Okay, then from there I will divide the line to how many boning channel line I want to create. Depends on you. You can make it 2 inches apart or 1 inch apart. I made that upper part 2 inches apart. Then the lower part, you also divide it to equal the amount of markings that you have marked for the upper part. And in this case, I've marked 1 inch apart. Okay, to equal the amount that we have for the upper part. But before we connect, you're going to come up by 1 inch from your hemline. This will be a guideline for you when you're attaching your boning. So the boning doesn't exceed this line. So you connect, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you can decide to make yours more than this amount. You can make yours 9, 12, depends on how much boning you want to add. Okay. Then on the cup area, mark your half inch, okay, away from the edge of the cup joining part. This will also be a guideline when you're attaching your boning so it doesn't poke your client when they wear the dress. So next we're going to do that of the back. For the back, I just came down by 1 inch from the armhole line, okay, or 2 inches to avoid discomfort of the boning on the body. Then you look for your waistline. On that waistline, find your bust span measurement. Okay, then from there, on that bust span measurement, now you're going to mark 1 inch to your left, 1 inch to your right, and draw your line. So this is how I found that of my back. Then came up by 1 inch on the hemline, then do the same thing for the other part. When doing the marking for the back, make sure that your reinforcing strip, okay, does not get obstructed by your boning line. All right. So let's move into part one, the sewing part. Who's excited? I'm excited. Okay, now finally we're going to start sewing, but oh god, I was almost exhausted at this point because I was the only one working, and my dear soulmate, you need to get helping hand while working. It helps a lot and it eases you a lot of stress. This was weekend and my workers don't come on weekend. I just had to do this alone because it was a very urgent job. Okay, let's move in to the sewing machine. Now for the sewing aspect, we're kicking off with the bustier area. So you're going to be joining the lining part. Yes, the interlining and the main lining. You'll be joining them differently. So I told you about lamination before, right? The lamination does not apply to the bustier area. It doesn't apply to the bustier area. You will be laminating them after you have joined them. So this is our cup. I'll go ahead and do the other part. Then you do the same thing for the lining part and the lace part. So when you're done, you take this to your iron, press it down. So we set that aside and work on our boning because I don't want to get off from the machine yet. I'll do the iron all at once. For the attachment of the boning, I said, okay, let me just do a straight sewing and attach the boning, sewing it down directly on the fabric. But at this point, my sewing machine just kept cutting the thread and it was almost frustrating for me. Like I was fixing thread every second, like guys. I even tried changing the needle and all that and all that. It didn't work at that point. So I had to use another means to attach my boning. So this is one means that you can use to attach your boning by sewing it directly on your fabric, or the other means I'm going to talk about now, and which is a strip. So in this strip method, which is also called the boning channel, you get a strip. This is strip of 2.5 inches. This strip measures 2.5 inches. You will fold it into two this way and you're going to stitch it down. Okay, so this is how you stitch it down. Just follow me the way I'm doing it. Place it this way and you stitch. Now you're stitching about 1/4 inch away from your line because you want your line to lay in between this strip, right? So this is our boning channel that we are creating. So just follow this way, sew down. Okay, after sewing down, you cut off the excess, you trim off any excesses and fold down. So you fold it down and you sew. So make sure that your boning can pass through this channel. Okay, so I'm done with all of them here for the front. So I'll go ahead now and insert my boning. Get your boning and place, then mark where that 1 inch we marked earlier stopped. Or that's where you end the boning. So you can use your paper tape to gum the edges. This is also a good way to protect the boning and prevent it from poking your client. So you measure this way and mark, then cut out before inserting. Okay, this works way better for me. So here I'm done inserting all the boning and let's just try out how it looks like. See, so these are it will look like when we are done. So we set this aside and work on the back. So for the back, it's the same method. After applying your boning channel, you insert your boning. Now in inserting the boning, okay, after marking and knowing the size of boning you want to use, you insert. Then when you get to that edge, okay, you want to sew the boning down because you don't want it to move around or detach itself in place. So that's how you're going to do that of the back until you're done with all of them. So we're done with that of the back. Let's see how it looks like. Okay, I like to know how to look like at the end of the day. So this is it. Looking already beautiful. Okay. Now we're going to attach our reinforcements. Yeah, for the back. So, I folded over then and pinned. So you follow that line where I pinned and stitch it down. When you're done, you are going to turn this over. Okay. You can give it a good press before continuing, but I did not. I just sew it down immediately. So when you fold it over, this is how you're going to attach it. On the center back, right? On the center back, you check the curve, the way it matches better. Okay. When you're done with that, you are going to mark 1 inch away from the edge where it should stop and do your marking for the midpoint. Then place your marking for boning. Yes, we're going to be attaching boning to this reinforcing strip that we have. The reason is because we will be using our eyelets and we don't want the eyelets to fall our hand when we are trying to snatch the dress. Okay. So the boning will help you keep that eyelet in place. It will reinforce that area so that the eyelet stays in place. And I'll also use this as a guideline to know where to insert my eyelet. So here I'm stitching down the boning. Funny enough, the sewing machine decided to stitch this one down after rejecting the other one. So I attach to the left and I'm going to attach to the left. Okay, attach to the right. This is my left now. So leaving about 1 inch in between. Okay, 3/4 or 1 inch in between the boning. Okay, this will be the point where your eyelets will stay. So after that, you're going to attach this now to the center back. So sewing from the edge of the edges, the very last edge, that's where you want to sew down, to keep that very neat and looking good. So I noticed that the boning was obstructing here. So I had to reduce it. We stitch down and that's it. So once you're done with this now, you can stitch down on the center back itself. All right. But to keep this very flat, you can go and iron it before doing the second stitching down. Iron it with your hemming gum to keep it in place, okay? So this center point now, you can stitch it down or you can just leave it when you're ready to put your eyelets. So going back to our ironing board, ironing table. So here, this strip that I cut out, I really don't like the flow. And I said, okay, I can redo it since I've not attached it yet. So I tried to make it have more curve on the neckline area. That was where the issue was coming from. But I still wasn't satisfied even after attaching my rack up and all that. I still went ahead to lose it, and at the end of the day, redraw it this way. So this was the final look of the strip. Okay, I have to show it to you here so that you understand that later. So let's go back to the sewing machine. Now here we're going to attach our bra cup. Now on the bra cup part, there's this method I use. When I measure out my bra cup to my satisfaction, I pin it on the upper part, then do a marking that follows the stitch line. After that, I will flip and open up just one seam allowance of that stitch line and stitch down the cup following that line that I've marked in the cup, and I'll sew it down. So this helps to open up my seam, okay? Opens up the seam when I'm done. So do the same thing. So the cup I use here, I even had to cut it. There are other methods you can apply, like applying that to the cup and all that. But I just cut mine. So just like I said, you pin down, then do your marking following your line, then flip everything away, exposing just one part of the seam allowance, which is where you will stitch down. So this is how you stitch down your cup, and I like the outcome. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is to laminate our cup to the lace part. Okay, so this bustier cup, now we're going to laminate it into the lace, or the lace into the bustier cup. So lamination, you can use your glue or you can use your hemming gum like I said earlier. So this is it after I'm done. You can see they are one now, and this looks so seamless. That's why I like to use this method. It doesn't show the sewing edges and all that. So next is our yoke, or you can call it your strip. So here I sew it down on the neckline area and on the armhole area only. So after sewing down the first part, depends on the one you sew down first, you top stitch that, then trim off and sew the other part. Okay, the top stitching helps the lining stay in, so it doesn't start poking around. So when you get to that edge, you want to make sure you have your required amount of fabric there before you close. So mine is just 2 inches. So I make sure I have that 2 inches before I end up my sewing. So this strip is the previous one I used, okay? So not the corrected one. So here is the corrected one. I've already attached it here. Yes, because after making your strip, you're going to attach it to your bustier area like a yoke. Then when you're done, you are going to sew the bustier to the lower bodice. So you will need a guideline when sewing. So first of all, mark your bust span. Mark your bust span. This will be your guideline, so that your seam line on the bustier will match up with that bust line that you have marked. But make sure you start off from the midpoint. That's the center front. So you pin down and make sure you sew from the midpoint to your left. Okay. Then from the midpoint again to your right. So when we're done, this is what we have. Can you see that? Looking good. So flip in your yoke and go ahead now to sew this down. So you take this to your sewing machine and sew down all the way to the armhole line. You want to sew all the way to the armhole line. The same thing applies for the back. You look for the matching piece and sew armhole line to the edge. You leave that edge out and sew the neckline down to the center back. So when we're done with that, this is what we have. Our dress is already looking so beautiful at this point. Like, look at the inseam finishing there. So beautiful. So you can see the back laying flat too. All right, we are moving. You're moving. So take all of this to your ironing table and give it a good press. One thing about sewing generally is always ironing. Iron makes your outfit come out great. So here, the neckline, I want it to stay down. I want it to stay down. So here, I use my hemming gum in there, in between the main fabric and the lining. Use my steam and I made sure I press it down hard. So you want to press it down and make sure it lays flat. Okay. So to give your cup, that's the cup area, yes, the bustier area, a good mold, I went ahead to, you know, use my steam to mold it down to have that cup like look. So when I was done with that, we are back to the table. We're going to go ahead now to join the sides. But before then, we're joining the shoulder line. You are going to place it this way, and you see, you place it the right side facing right side and tuck in that of the front into that of the back. You tuck it inside, align it perfectly. Then you can pin it down. You align and you pin it down. So this will help give us a very good inseam finish at that point. So this is what I did. I push it into that of the back and put my hands from that of the back and pull it out. Pull it out and align. So that's how I did mine. So when you align properly, make sure the edges are aligned together also. So you take this now to your sewing machine and sew down. And here we are. Trim off any excesses that you have, then pull out. So when you pull it out, you're going to have a very clean inseam finish. Do the same thing for the other parts. Cut off any excesses you have and pull out this way. And you see. So we have our shoulder line joined together. So next we're going to be joining from the side. You know, we just joined on the shoulder line. So for the side, you're going to place it right side facing right side. Okay, align it perfectly the way it should be. If there are any excesses, make sure you cut it out. And we're going to apply also the inseam finish method here. Okay, but first of all, let me trim off any excesses that I have. Just trim off any excesses you have there, if there is any. So how do you know if there's excess? Place them to align together. If one is poking out more than the other, you trim it off. Okay. So you're going to align them right side facing right side, and you will flip the lining of the back or that of the front, depending on the one that is more convenient for you. But for me here, I use the front because it's more convenient for me. So you flip the lining of the front over to that of the back. It's quite easy to do. Just rewatch that, you get it. So I joined it for the left side and for the right side and trimmed off to have at least 1 inch left. Okay, you must have at least 1 inch left for your side seam in case of any adjustments. Then open it up back to the right side. So can you see now? So next I went to fit on the mannequin to see if everything is laying flat. This fitting time is very, very important. If you're making dresses like this, it helps to know if there's any error. You can easily correct it before you continue. So after the fitting, I went ahead to close the hemline. For the hemline, you just tuck in the seams. Okay, tuck in the seams about 1/2 inch. Okay, inside and stitch down. So when you get to the side seam, make sure you have about 1/2 inch there. So that means when you're joining the side seam, you don't sew to the end. All right, so this is it now. We are done stitching the hemline and everything is looking so good. Next, we are going to apply our eyelets. So for the eyelet, remember that space we added, okay, that space in between the boning when we were sewing the reinforcement for the back. On that space now is where you mark your points. Here I marked 1 inch apart. So look for that point You can fold to crease, then you mark. So the way you've applied that of the left side, that's how you're going to do that of the right, to make them align together. So 1 inch away from each other. Next, we're going to open this up and insert our eyelets, or should I say fix our eyelets. Okay. So for the eyelets, I went ahead to use my soldering iron. So you can do this marking I'm doing first before using the soldering iron. So use the soldering iron to pierce through and put in your eyelets. So what I did here is I pierced first. After piercing with the soldering iron, I went ahead to use my eyelets machine. This is also called grommet. Okay, it comes with different dices depending on the size of the eyelets you want to use. So the size I'm using here, I have the dice. I fixed it in, then place it in position that it's supposed to be. Make sure it was okay. Then I started fixing all my eyelets. So you tighten it with this machine. There are other options that you can work with. Depends on the one you have. If you don't have any, you can take this to the market and they'll do it for you. For a token, they will do it for you. Okay. It's not must that you will do it yourself. So I went ahead and fixed the eyelet for all the holes. For all the holes. You can see how I'm going about it. I didn't have an angle video to illustrate this better, but what I did is I placed my eyelet, okay, facing the right side, then place the other one. There's a flatter one, they call it the wash. Okay, place it on the wrong side and put it into your grommet and you press down. That's literally the step I followed. Okay, so I went ahead to do for all of them, and here is our final result at the end of the day. Okay, you can see how beautiful it's looking. I really like the outcome of the eyelets. It adds extra color to the dress. Now we are going into the part two, sewing the lower part, the skirt. No, that's just the upper part we've been talking about. So for the skirt, the first thing I did was to laminate. Yeah. But before the lamination, went ahead to fold in the hemline of the lining. Then after that, I went ahead to laminate. Here I used the glue for the lamination. Just use your glue on the edges and you are good to go. Or you can use your hemming gum. I've explained this earlier in the upper part B, on the upper part video. Okay, if you listen carefully, I explained it there. So you just place your glue to the corners, that's the edges, and you place it together this way. You just beat it down and it stays together. So this saves you time that you use to pin this down or take it to your sewing machine to hold them down, because this is the interlining. So the lining that goes with the lace, they have to stay together. While the other one will be used to turn the whole fabric to give you your inseam finishing. So I went ahead to do that of the back. Okay, the same way you open up, sew down the hemline, use your glue and place your lace on it. So the same process. So once you're done with the laminating or lamination, we're going to start sewing. The first thing I did for the sewing part is to join that of the back, okay, on the center back. So by now you should know where your center back is. My center back, I notched that point where the zipper will lie. So that's where I know, that's how I know that that's my center back. So you can go ahead to notch yours to not get confused, especially if you're using a curved skirt pattern like I did. All right, so you mark the point where your zipper will end, you notch. So after notching, you're going to sew down to where the slit will end. So I just came up 3 inches from where my lining fabric stopped, and I went ahead to sew it down. Okay, you open it up, and now it's time to fix the zipper. On that space you left up is where the zipper will stay. So you follow your seam allowance for the zipper and stitch down. You also turn to the other part also and stitch down. And this is it. We're done with the zipper. Okay, got a little bit stuck here because of the sequence. So if you're using a sequence fabric, you can always trim off the sequence on the way to avoid this blockage. So next, we're going to turn this in because we don't want our seam allowances exposed on the wrong side. We want to close it and turn it in with the lining part. So for this lining part, I use the shining part as my wrong side and the plain part as my right side because this will be placed inside and I want the skin feel for it. All right. So first of all, I placed the part that I've already worked on to find my points. Okay, this will be my guideline. I marked the points where my zipper will stop first, then went ahead to also mark the points where the slit will start from. Okay, so when we're done, you're going to take this now to the sewing machine. You will hem that down part. So I went ahead to hem that down part and sew down in between the chalk markings. So next we're going to turn. So to turn now, you place the fabric right side facing right side. Right side facing right side like this. But before then, close your zipper. And on the waistline, you're going to mark half inch to your left, half inch to your right. You can make yours 1 inch, depends on how much exposure you want to add to the back. This is because of the back eyelets. You know, we are tying the back and we want to have a clean inseam finish there. So that's why we're doing that. So you're going to follow that marking now, okay? But now on your lining parts, you sew it and sew down. After following that marking on the waistline, you're going to continue sewing down on the zipper line. Okay, so I am done here, and here is it. You trim off your excess zipper and trim off on your zipper line. Then on that square point like so, you notch, but don't pass your seam, don't pass your thread. So I'll do the same thing to the other side. I trim off and I notch. This notching will help that area on the waistline that we just did an inseam finish on to relax at the end of the day. You're turning that out. After turning it out, you close up your zipper. Yeah. So this is something we're gonna have. So this is it. That's how the edge on the waistline will look like. You have something like an edge there. So when you're done, you place your front part now on it. Can you see what I'm doing? If there are any excesses, you can trim off. First of all, you want to align everything to sit properly. Then trim off any excesses. But before trimming, make sure you measure. Trim off any excesses that you have that you think may obstruct you. This trimming of this excess is very important because we are going to be doing an inseam finish, and when you're doing inseam finish, most time you don't get to see what you're doing until you're done. Okay, now take a good look at this. This is placed right side facing right side, and this is the back that is facing us, right? So bring your lining for the front and place over this, okay? The wrong side facing the wrong side. So you align it properly and trim off the excess. If I trim it to equal what we have there already. So when you're done, you're going to go ahead to pin down. So I'm going to pin this down now. So pinning it down will make it stay in place because we are going to sew this. But before then, we are marking. So find the hip line. On the hip line, impute the hip measurement divided by 2 because this fabric is opened now, it's not on fold. So as you're putting the measurement, make sure that the tape lies in the middle. Okay, so I'll do the same thing for the waistline, putting the midpoint of that measurement in the middle, which is the center front or the center back. then connect my lines. So I'll take this to my sewing machine now and sew down. You're sewing all the way to the down. So, and I'm here, I'm done. I'll trim off, making sure I have at least 1 inch seam allowance left. Take off my pins and trim off till I get to the lace part. So this trimming helps your seam relax, okay? It helps the seam to stay relaxed. Now put your hand inside and bring out your skirts. And voila. We are done with the skirts. Yes, we are literally done with the skirt. There's nothing else apart from attaching, which leads us to the part 3, joining the skirts to the blouse, joining the blouse to the skirt, whichever. But before then, I decided to take some break eating. So make sure you are eating. So mates, when you're on a job, eat. All right. So let's go straight to business. Now, to attach the skirt, I want to do what is called the Basque Effect. Basque Effect is where you add something like a V shape to your sewing. And this time around, I use my pattern to find my points. I'm looking for my waist point here. I use it to find my waistline point. Then from that waistline point, I'm going to come down by either 3 inches, 4 inches, depend on how much effect of the basque you want to add. Okay. Now, this is the skirt part. Okay. I want to align it to the seam of that of the blouse to make sure that they are okay. If there are any excesses or maybe the seam doesn't align, you can go ahead and adjust it from the skirt part because it will be easier for you to adjust here. Okay. So on that waistline now, from that waistline that I marked, I'll come down by 3 inches. You can do 4 inches, you can do 5, depend on the amount of basque. You can even make it curvy. You know, there are different styles that you can apply in the basque effect. So when I got that point, I already know that this is where I'll stop. Then I went ahead to mark this straight to the waistline point, okay? To have that V shape, to have that basque effect. So you mark it like this, mark it like the way you see I'm marking. So this will just be a guideline for you when you're sewing so that you will be working in accordance to what you want. All right. So check your waistline on the skirt. If there are any excesses, make sure you trim it off because everything has to be equal when you're sewing. Now look for the midpoint, that's the center front there. Now you're going to open up your zipper. Open up your zipper. You can see the way I open up my zipper. Find your center front and place. Okay. Place it on the waistline that you have marked. That waistline we marked earlier. Place it. Find the point on that waistline on the side. Then whatever inches you have come down by, you mark and draw your basque effect. I do this if my client is not there. If your client is there, you can ask them to wear the dress and you do this on them. But because this dress was we made it from afar, like the distance was there, she had to send her measurement, then I had to work and send back to her. So that's why I had to do this way. But this method always works out for me, and I hope it will work out for you also. So when you're done with that, you're going to cut this out. Yes, it becomes an excess now. You cut it out. That V markings that you have created on the skirt part, you cut it out. Then take this to your sewing machine and stitch down. You stitch it down with the lining so that everything stays in place. So here I'm done stitching down. I'm going to be attaching this now. I'll be attaching it to the blouse. You can see how I flipped over and made sure that that V point matches up with the center front line on the blouse. Okay. So you make it align properly. let them match properly. You pin down, then trace them, okay? Trace them to towards the marking on the blouse. Now the marking on the blouse, remember, is a V kind of line, and you want it to be visible when you're sewing. Trust me. So you can do the marking all the way to the back area where you want to stop. So use your pattern to find the waistline for the back also and mark. Make sure the point you're stopping at the back area, so on the center back, is equal to the amount of space you left on your skirt. Okay. So I went ahead to sew that down, and here we are done sewing. So what you do here, you notch or trim off any excesses that you may have. So the notch is on that center front part, that part that has the V. Make sure you notch there so that it relax. Then tuck in the blouse into the skirt like this. And you see. So when you tuck it in, this is what you're going to have. And at this point, we are almost done with this dress. In fact, we are done. There's nothing remaining again. And here is it. Can you see? Can you see that V effect now? Although it's not that deep, but it's still obvious. So I went ahead to hem the slits using my hemming gum. You hem it down, and we're done. Now for this back part, I want you to take a good look at that zipper area. You know that square we made earlier on the skirt where we closed it up. You can see how it equals to what we have for the eyelets for the rope. Okay, you want to make sure that when you're done tying the rope, that point can close up and be equal. Okay, that is one criteria you want to always make sure is okay. So I went ahead to measure the hip, the waist, measure the bust area, make sure that everything was okay and equal to the measurement that I'm working with. All right. So at this point, we are done. You can go ahead now to make the rope for the eyelet. You know, we've not made the rope for the eyelet. So for the rope, I went ahead to cut my fabric. This fabric is a 3 inches fabric. Okay. Then I sewed about half inch, then trim off the rest. Okay, trim off the seam allowances there because you want it to be as flat as possible. So after trimming off, I used my safety pin to turn it inside. Like this took me time because the rope is quite long. And there are other options you can use though, like your ribbon, your bias, or a cord, whichever that is convenient for you to use, you can make use of it. So I went ahead to turn mine all the way. And when I was done, I ironed it flat. I ironed it very, very flat, as you can see. So at this point, we are done with this dress. So you go ahead, place your eyelet, take your pictures, put on your dress, fit it. Let's see how it looks like. Okay. All right. Now that you have confidently learned how to make an inbuilt corset, grab your tools and make sure you start practicing. You know, practice leads to perfection, and you don't want to forget what you have learned. As you have learned, you practice, and after practicing, make sure you drop a comment in this video to tell us how your outfit turned out. Or you can send me a message on my WhatsApp on the number you see on your screen to let me know if it turned out great. But before you go, remember to subscribe, like, share, drop your comments. Like I said, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.